I've come to make an announcement. Shadow the Hedgehog is. I, Dr. Eggman, have come to make an announcement. I've heard of the man-child shelvening videos, starting with that skeletal freak Skeletor, not to mention the overgrown lizard, Bowser, who some think would defeat me in a death battle, preposterous as that is. But I'm not here to deal with them today. I'm here to take my rightful place among the evil of the shelvening. And if that Skeletor figure is going to have so many different variants of himself, then it only stands to reason that there might as well be a couple of mine as well. So, not only will I be joining the shelvening today, but my variants will too. Dun dun dun! So, let's begin. Hey there, I'm Caden Rains, or the Man-Child according to some. Welcome to my basement. Today we're moving on from a group of shiny-shelled villains to a group of shiny-headed villains instead. Those being the various Dr. Eggman or Dr. Robotnik, depending on when you grew up with this series and what version of it you're looking at. And we have 5 different Robotniks to look at. We have modern Eggman in the center, classic over on this side, Sonic Prime Eggman, and then movie Eggman and his grandfather, Dr. Gerald Robotnik, at the end there. When they first announced, or when they first leaked the fact that we were getting a Dr. Gerald Robotnik, I did laugh a little bit, and I almost didn't get him, but how often are you going to be able to get a old man Jim Carrey action figure? And I guess you could say I have 2. He's not exactly a spring chicken, no offense to you, Mr. Carrey, if you ever come across this video. But let's take a look at the 5 Dr. Eggman figures we've got here. Dr. Robotnik, whatever you prefer. I usually think of him as Robotnik because my first inclination with Sonic media was Sad AM and the comics before ever playing any of the games, so Robotnik is my default. Regardless though, let's take a look at each figure, starting with modern Eggman. So modern Eggman / Robotnik is one of the only 2 figures of this lot that comes with an accessory, that being this special zone / checkpoint marker that from the games, especially from the early games. It's almost kind of interesting that they bothered giving him this, because by the time they were using this design for him, they weren't using this design for the special stages / checkpoints anymore. So I think they just had this design for an accessory and decided to throw it in with Eggman just because they didn't have anything else for him. So for the accessory, it goes both ways. You can put it either way and it'll snap back, sort of like it does in the games. It doesn't glow or anything. We're not at that price point, but it's fine. If you're making a little diorama with Sonic figures, then this isn't a bad thing to have. But we're not going to focus on it too much more than that. Our figure here is pretty well articulated. He's got shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints. He doesn't have any alternate hands. Again, we're not at that price point, but he does have 2 different hand gestures that mean you can get some good poses out of him, as far as, saying, ordering his things to do stuff, holding himself, cursing that hedgehog, things like that. He's also got 3 joints for his legs. Well, the ones at his waist are just circular. There's no ball joint there. And then it's a little loose at the knees, or at least on mine, his left knee is. But it still stands fine. I don't think I'd try to mess with his feet too much, other than just kind of being out, like, to hold him up. I mean, he's got some big feet, so good for him, I suppose. But it doesn't seem like it'd be worth trying to pose him in too dynamically, which he doesn't really do that anyway. He's either in a robot or in some command station. He's not doing much cardio, no matter what the internet says. So I feel like just having him like that is fine. And then his overall look is pretty good. I'm not going to call it a perfect paint job. If we look at some of his details, like where different colors meet, and it's especially like on his nose, it's acceptable if you're not looking too close, but it's not great. It could be better. But again, it's not bad. So that's modern Eggman. So let's take a look back in the past at what he was before he became modern. So here's classic Eggman. He's the other one that comes with an accessory, that being the end of zone sign. It does have his face on both sides, and it does spin, but considering it's his accessory and not like Sonic or Tails or whatever, kind of makes sense that he wouldn't plan on them ever changing it to anybody's face but his own. So that doesn't bother me. The fact that it spins at all, I think, is pretty good. However, considering that he's the same height as his modern counterpart, really goes to show that sometimes the scale shouldn't be kept like too specific for some waves. It makes sense for classic to be a 4-inch scale and for the Sonic figures to be on that scale, but modern Eggman / Robotnik really should have been on a 5-inch or 6-inch scale. And I get that there's probably a bunch of internal things to work off of at a toy company for that kind of stuff, but I really wish modern Eggman was taller. He was even taller than classic Eggman in Generations, if memory serves. If not, I'm sorry, I'm not big enough nerd. I apologize. But as we will see when we get to the other 3 figures who are all on the 5-inch scale, it would be an improvement if modern was also on that scale. But getting back to classic, I do think in some ways, maybe it's because he's a simpler look, his paint job's a little better. It's not perfect. He's still got a little bit of an issue where colors meet. But, it's still not bad by any means. I think it's better than modern slightly, but again, he's also a simpler design. To that end, he's actually got ball joints, or at least, maybe not ball joints, but a better joint for where his legs meet his waist, which is interesting compared to modern, but otherwise is a very similar set of joints. You can pose him. He's not going to stand on one leg without assistance, but you could try. And there he is. He's just classic Eggman. Now, because I grew up with Sad AM and the Archie comics, classic Eggman really isn't that classic to me. Like, yes, I did play the games when I was younger, when they were still Sega Genesis and before the modern redesigns, but this is never what I consider classic when I think about the various versions of Robotnik / Eggman. And I don't know if it ever will be. Like, I'm not surprised whenever I play a classic Sonic game or one of these newer ones that's emulating that appearance, but I really would like a Sad AM Robotnik figure that I wouldn't have to pay somebody to make a custom out of, because I'm sure that would be cheap as hell. But it's still a good figure. His head actually goes around too, at least to a degree. So you can have him looking off to the side like that, I suppose. But otherwise, he's just good. He's Eggman. If you like the classic design, there he is. And if you like the classic design, he comes with a sign. And if it rhymes, I'll say it on a dime. Especially if I hear a chime. or taste some lime. Sour. All right, but now that we've got modern and classic out of the way, we're going to jump to Netflix Eggman. That being this specimen of Eggitude. Now, like I said, he is on the 5 scale, similar to the other two figures, and I think that really improves the detail and design. I'm not saying this is a better design than modern Eggman. Even in his own this series, the ultimate version of Eggman was still modern when the Eggman Council created like a prism version of themselves. It was just modern Eggman. So even they knew deep down they weren't the best version. The only reason I got this version though was that it was on sale. You might have seen that when I panned over earlier. And otherwise I probably wouldn't have got him. They didn't make the entire council. I kind of wish they had made the teen version of him. That was my favorite version of him from the show. And there wasn't a lot that I can say was my favorite version of the show. I got some other figures that we'll look at eventually, but mostly just to have them. I feel like that show could have been cut down about halfway and then gotten a better voice actor for Bass Knuckles. And no offense to him, but it was not a Knuckles voice. They had the same problem in Sonic Frontiers. That was somebody's not casting well. But anyway, back to these figures. I'm rambling. So this one doesn't come with an accessory. Instead, if you click his star, it makes his hair jump, which was, yes, it's a toupee in the show. He was still bald. Also, this is Mr. Dr. Eggman, which, whatever. He also has 2 different hands like modern Eggman. One to point, and one is just, I don't know, to get handouts from the government or whatever. He does have ball joints for his legs where it meets his waist, and then he has the 2 other joints as well, so you can pose him. Again, like all these figures, because of the way they're weighted, it's not like you're going to be able to pose a lot and without like a stand to keep him. But like I said earlier, because he's a 5-inch scale, the paint job can be much more detailed, or at least less mistakes will be made with it. So I feel like this is probably the best paint job of the cartoony Eggman. Like, it's not perfect, but it's much more in line with what it should be. Like, look at his nose. Compare modern's nose to Mr. Dr. Eggman, and it's so much cleaner, which is a shame. Like I said, I really wish they'd make a 5-inch scale of modern. I don't really like the 5-inch scale for the Sonic figures, like the actual animal guys, but for him, for the Eggman, 5-inch should be where it is. The only one I think works in 4-inch is Classic, because he's supposed to be shorter, or at least he's always portrayed shorter. Anyway, though, so that's it for him. There's not really much else to say. He does have a lot of good detail if you're going by the show, if you care about that for this spin-off thing. But I do think he looks good. Like I said, I wasn't going to buy him if he wasn't on sale. But the fact that I found him on sale, I am happy that he looks as good as he does, considering. So, if you've got him, I'm not saying, like, if you spent full price on him, it's a bad thing. But you probably enjoyed the show more than I did. I didn't hate the show, but I didn't love the show either. Again, I'm starting to ramble. Now that we've got Mr. Dr. Eggman, let's take a look at the 2 movie Eggmen, and then we'll find a place on the shelf for them. So here are our movie Eggmen. We've got, they do go by Robotnik, and Gerald Robotnik has always been Robotnik as far as I know, at least in the English dub. But here's Ivo Robotnik / Eggman proper, and then Gerald Robotnik, aka Eggman's grandfather. They are both, again, being 5-inch scale, they're both pretty well done. They're more realistic, obviously, because they're based off Jim Carrey. And, I liked his portrayal of Eggman. It's not what I'd want game Eggman to become or comic Eggman. But for the movie, I really do enjoy his portrayal. at least of regular Eggman. You know, I didn't hate Gerald Robotnik, but I'm not sad that they killed him off in the movie. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but they do. And so yeah, so they're very similar, like overall. I was actually surprised. Well, I guess really not. Like, I'm really just saying that because they're Jim Carrey. But Gerald's a little bit taller, not a whole lot, but a little bit. And then, like, they have a similar stance. You can kind of see the way they're standing. They have joints at the knees and waist and feet, so you can pose them. You can, I guess you can try to recreate the dance scene if you really wanted to, Boogie. But I don't know if I'm gonna suggest you do that. The even their face sculpts are different. I mean, yes, they're very similar, but like they had Gerald Robotnik with this nose, whereas Ivo, aka Eggman, has Jim Carrey's nose in the movie. So the fact that they didn't just cheap out and made them very different sculpts is pretty impressive. Because I've seen some figures even from Jakks Pacific, which all of these are from Jakks Pacific, that are really, really simplistic as far as changes between figures. Even in the Sonic line, some of them are. It's almost like did you do anything different? But these are definitely different, from the stomach to the mustache to the height. I was actually impressed when I first looked at these two next to each other out of their box. It was not they were not as similar together as I thought they were going to be. Yes, you can still tell they're Jim Carrey, but it wasn't like that was some mystery. They even have a scene in the movie where they make a joke about it. So there we go. They don't come with accessories. I kind of wish, like, maybe Ivo came with a coffee cup or something. That would have required a slightly different hand or something. It's just kind of lame that they don't come with anything. I know they're slightly taller than the other Sonic figures in the line, but like Knuckles, one of the Knuckles came with giant flaming fists. And you can't have the two humans with anything? Whatever. If I had to change anything about these, it would be that instead of Gerald, that they had done Stone. That's another character that I think works for the movies, but not necessarily the games. I've seen game artwork of him, or game stylized artwork of Agent Stone. It's like, yeah, he doesn't need to be in the games or the comics, but keep him in the movies. Heck, make him the main bad guy in some movie, where if Jim Carrey doesn't want to come back, just do it. Then maybe we'll get a figure of him finally. But anyway, so that's the movie figures. They're both good. That 5-inch scale makes them preferable in some ways to modern Eggman. I really wish he was 5 scale, like 3 of these 5 are. But now that we've looked at all 5, let's go find a space on the shelf and give these doctors their due. And there we go. All 5 doctors in one place. They are going to be to the left of our Skeletors and the farther down from the Koopa Troopa down on the other side of them. Behind them, we're going to have their various creations on stands, and that'll be the next video where we look at some of the robotic menaces that the Eggman Empire has brought to being. And then farther down will be more sci-fi related villains. At least what I consider sci-fi related villains. Basically mechanical. If there's mechanical elements to them, they're sci-fi. This is, however, going to be the first part of the shelves where some of the scale doesn't really work. It didn't really happen much with the Koopa Troop because, who knows how big they're actually supposed to be. But look at Eggman next to this guy. Eggman's over 6 feet tall, or about 6 feet tall. And while Skeletor is tall himself, the fact that the most iconic, or at least the most currently recognizable version of him is so tiny, is this going to throw my OCD off? It's not going to be a real problem. It's just a me problem. But there they are for now. If you have any of these figures, how do you like them? Especially the movie versus cartoony aspects of the set we've got here. And do you like how my placement is? Let me know down below. Let me know if you have any suggestions for what else should go in this area. Like I said, right now, the next set is going to be some robots. But you can kind of get a glimpse of what's to come after that. So let me know if you've got any preferences, or if you think I should change anything that we've done so far with the shelvening. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out in my basement. I hope you had a good time, and I'll see you on the next one.